Listen to the wind in the junipers and the tales of the shifting, whispering sands.
Hello, my name is Ike Pickett. I'm here to talk to you today about the right to keep and bear arms and why it's important in the United States. When the founders of this free country called the United States were dealing with the essential need for armaments to come from every source to defend the new nation, they understood the importance of having an armed citizenry. Guns were scarce, and the new nation had very few factories to produce guns, cannons, munitions, and firearms. They had to rely a lot on imports from other countries. Spain and France supplied weapons to the new republic during and throughout the Revolutionary War. Citizens were enlisted into the Continental Army on the condition that they had to provide their own armaments. The enlistment agreement executed by the Continental Army required, quote, "Each of us do engage to furnish and carry with us into the service a good effective firearm and also a bayonet, if to be obtained, cartridge box and knapsack, and if no bayonet, in lieu thereof, a sword, hatchet, or tomahawk." End of quote. Weapons were also stolen from the British storehouses and supply ships whenever the opportunity presented itself. The stolen weapons were cached and hidden away from the British regulars to be used against them in the upcoming conflicts. The war lasted from 1775 until 1783, a long and trying period for citizens and soldiers alike. At the beginning of the war, Thomas Paine wrote in a pamphlet he called Common Sense, quote, "We have every opportunity and every encouragement before us to form the noblest, purest constitution on the face of the earth. We have it in our power to begin the world over again." End of quote. When the conflict later became intense and the hardships were magnified, he wrote this: "These are the times that try men's soul. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will in this crisis shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. Yet we have this consolation with us, that the harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph. What we obtain too cheap, we esteem too lightly. It is dearness only that gives everything its value. Heaven knows how to put a proper price upon its goods, and it would be strange indeed if so celestial an article as freedom should not be highly rated." End of quote. When the Founding Fathers, having shared with the citizens the hardships and endured the trials of the War for Independence, wrote the Constitution of these United States, they had in mind the need for a free people to speak freely and to keep and bear arms in order to preserve freedom in the new nation in the event of an uprising of a force that would take their rights away. So the wording used in the First and Second Amendments to the Constitution reminded us of a need for citizens to speak freely and to keep and bear arms in order to take a last stand, if necessary, to defend their rights and their sacred honor from future powers that would ignore such God-given rights. When you pay close attention to the wording of the Second Amendment, it becomes clear that it was not written to protect people from each other. It was written to protect against despotism. It states this, quote, "A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." End of quote. In the 2008 case District of Columbia versus Heller, the Supreme Court held that the Second Amendment protects an individual right to possess a firearm unconnected with service in a militia, and to use that arm for traditionally lawful purposes such as self-defense within the home. It is important for citizens to understand that the Supreme Court does not have the power to change the Constitution or other laws of the country. Creating or changing laws is a function that belongs to the legislature and is well defined in the Constitution by what is called the balance of powers. The balance of powers established by the Constitution, which is still the supreme law of the land, by the way, clearly establishes that the function of the judicial branch of the government is to interpret laws within the framework of the Constitution as written, not to rewrite them. The Supreme Court was not given the power to rewrite the Second Amendment by disconnecting the possession of firearms from service in a militia. So they didn't. They simply defined, in that case, that the amendment also includes the right to possess a weapon for personal and family protection and for any other lawful purpose. So, what does the Second Amendment have to do with the security of a free state? It provides protection of the capacity to fight for freedom against despotism should it raise its ugly head by force in the form of forced fascism, socialism, or communism at some point in the future. Hopefully, it will never happen again to that degree. But the Second Amendment is there just in case it were to happen. Don't let the do-gooders on the left ever talk you out of that. They don't have the right to redefine the Constitution, and they sure don't have the right to violate it, even when some lazy or cowardly prosecutor refuses to prosecute or a judge refuses to punish them for it. I see a similarity between 1776 and now. The words of Thomas Paine then also have a place in the modern world. We are living in a revolution similar to that of 1775 to 1783, albeit a peaceful one for the most part. There are bloody wars in diverse places in the world, but while such wars rage, peaceful people around the world are taking steps toward the protection of individual freedom wherever they may live. The revolution is occurring peacefully in the world of finance and money. Before the discovery of the internet and cyberspace, it was extremely difficult to move money from one place to another without the facility of banks and governments. Such facilities required trust. The trust necessary for the movement of money has severely deteriorated in the last few decades as the activities of the banks and those who control them demonstrate no respect or consideration for the ones that have traditionally used and trusted them. Under the tax and spend economic system put forth by John Maynard Keynes, trust is being lost forever. Personal wealth and prosperity have been confiscated by clever mechanisms to cause the wealth of nations to gravitate upward into the hands of a few haughty people who have designs on full control of all the people in the world. Money and power do not make people free and wealthy. Charity makes people free and wealthy. Unfortunately, a natural man cannot see that. His nature is greed and competition, the exalting of himself above others only to find himself very much alone at the top of a lonely and porous pyramid of sand. Always wanting more, and never finding satisfaction or enough. It is sharing and caring for one another that makes us free and rich, not power and dominion over others. Wars have been fought over thousands of years by force and devastation. But now there's a new war being quietly conducted in the new frontier of cyberspace that requires no violence nor conflict. It is implemented by the ability to store and exchange wealth and goods privately on a ledger that is kept and verified by thousands of computers around the world and without human control or manipulation. It is greed-proof and control-proof. It is the best tool of free enterprise in the history of the world. It is called Bitcoin. All others can be changed or manipulated by the human hands that created them, but not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the only truly decentralized currency available in the world today. Like the arms set forth in the Second Amendment, Bitcoin is an armament against despotism. It can be exchanged between parties that may or may not agree with each other. Such transactions are recorded on permanent ledger and cannot be disputed. There is no other method that provides such a peaceful neutralization. Who needs a gun when there's nothing to argue about? It takes courage to remain free, and it takes courage to venture into the frontier of cyberspace. Doing so requires knowledge and determination. Knowledge dispels fear. As a person increases his knowledge and understanding, his fear subsides. It takes courage and determination to establish a free nation. It also takes courage to preserve it by the power extended by its creation into the new frontier of cyberspace. The words of Thomas Paine are as urgent now as they were back then. Quote, "We have every opportunity and every encouragement before us to form the noblest, purest constitution on the face of the earth. We have it in our power to begin the world over again." End of quote. Let's do this together and share freely the wealth and prosperity that is coming to the people of the world through their diligence and commitment to the truth. Thanks for listening. This is Ike Pickett signing off once again. I look forward to seeing you in the next podcast.
Listen to the wind in the junipers and the tales of the shifting, whispering sands. Wild horses on the run into the setting sun and the smell of the leather in his hand.